what you got there.
All right, so how are you guys utilizing technology to go ahead and help intactivism?
So through tech,
Well,
anything that we wanted to do through technology, if there's ways to help people, like we've been trying to find ways ultimately to help people get information. Like, have you ever tried asking an AI like Chat GTP questions about circumcision to see what they say?
Yes, there have been lots of intactivists I've done that. You can see it on YouTube as well.
Nice.
To circle back to the doula thing real quick, what is your success rate on saving babies with teaching expecting parents about circumcision?
I would say about throughout my years of doing it, I would say 80%, 80%, 80% success rate. Once in a while you'll come across people, not people that I was like directly working with, but people that I spoke with and was trying to help personally. But they just would just completely shut down and just say, that what their belief is, and they don't want to hear anything else. And that does happen once in a while.
your logical mind perceiving that practice is something you'd expect to see on something akin to the movie Idiocracy, but then you have to stop and realize they really actually do it on Earth.
Yeah, that's actually interesting because a lot of people compare
If you have to
like current
stress
world with idiocracy, actually.
how
Um,
idiotic the practice is with them, there may be no convincing them. It might just simply be an issue of standing intelligence factor.
okay, it's interesting because the politicians and the higher government, they are incentivizing people to get circumcisions by allowing people to get it for free.
And most of us,
So,
they are complete incompetent idiots. The presidential candidates, none of them are worth their weight in shit. Biden, however, has at least provided a lot of comedy, and I am grateful for his presidency to that. I mean, there are so many hilarious moments caught on camera thanks to his time in the spotlight. Otherwise, neither candidates have done anything remotely competent, and none of them are frankly qualified for the primary job duty of the presidency of the United States, and that being commander in chief of the U.S. military. They're completely incompetent for the primary role. And that's another thing I was pushing while I was serving was for the forced reinstatement of the office of five-star general of the United States Army. So any soldiers deployed outside of the continental United States are not bound to answer to the US president as their commander in chief. Putting control of the military back in the hands of the military and out of these corrupt ass politicians.
okay. Well, I guess circling back to the politicians stuff, how do you think that infant circumcision is going to end? Do you think there's any chance that we're going to be able to change like the laws and make it at least have the Medicaid system not fund circumcision?
Well, personally, with the information that has been available about the practice, I'm surprised they haven't razed and burnt down their facilities already.
I would love to see viral trends happening where people are just being asked to show like ethical proof of what's going on, and like people can see it. It's just I can't even understand like how to get all the pediatricians and everybody on board with understanding how the data will actually change how everybody thinks about it.
Yeah, and they're your stem cells. You think your body has any intended purpose for it? You better believe it.
Yeah, so fan question, because you did mention that you do help Nigeria in tactivism. Fan said, how exactly is she helping in tactivism in Nigeria when she is living in the USA?
So I just became involved, like I think it was a few years ago for an intactivist. That would be Sebe Maloba in Kenya or Uganda. And they've been doing for a long time, helping protect and foster intactivism there. And then in Nigeria, I started helping the last almost 2 years. I just basically facilitating whenever they receive donations. They are not able to get PayPal in their locations, and that's one of the common ways people donate. So I'm able to receive those and send them to them in the ways that they can receive for their projects. And that helps them immensely because they need funding for a lot of their projects. And in Kenya, Uganda, they work with school children. and families that are choosing to keep their children intact. And there's a lot of pressure sometimes in the communities and from elders. And sometimes I remember even during COVID, there was limited supplies being given out in these communities, and the families that were choosing to stay intact weren't given as many supplies. In little ways like that, they try to pressure people to conform to the cutting culture that's been pressured on them. And you know, it's just waking people up to the fact that it doesn't prevent AIDS, and it's not cleaner. It's just it's just like a cop out. It's a
And
cop
you
out
can
from
bet it's
natural
immediately being sold to the biometric database,
natural
which
hygiene.
the Army's variation of that they personally have run and operate is amazing.
Okay. Do you have any more projects though that's going on in Africa for intactivism?
Oh yeah.
One of them.
Yes, I did made a Facebook page for DIGS, which is a domain of intactivist solutions. So it was for Sebi Maloba there in Kenya, Uganda, and they want to fund a project for their school and to be able to provide more resources to help sustain their community and their infrastructure for because if these intactivist communities in Africa get more support, then it helps them to be able to resist the pressures to circumcise. And it's interesting how like it's built in within to their communities. It's really whatever support that they are building. It's some people are really like, I guess they get ostracized sometimes if we're not doing it. So that just goes back to my studies on understanding how to start to have conversations to help people to make steps.
Cultural peer pressure.
Yeah, steps towards overcoming the challenges that come up from because a lot of people feel that way, that even in the United States and other countries, there's a huge intactivist movement even in Israel and in Muslim nations. There's a lot of people who would agree with them, but they don't speak out about it, or they're quiet about it. And so I really feel like there has to be ultimately a viral trend that has to go around that helps people to become more quickly helps to change their mind and get them focused. So it becomes more of a common consensus, more of an obvious, if people, I think that can happen. I'm just not yet sure how, but that's what I've been seeking on finding is what is the most effective way.
Okay, so my question is, can you name the intactivist groups that are in the Middle East?
Oh, okay. So in Israel?
No, not in Israel, but like the Muslim countries, because I know
Yeah,
there's one in Israel. Do you know?
right. Yeah, yeah. There's this huge movement there, and my goodness, they have their work cut out for them. Because you're just in a culture that's been doing it for thousands of years and defines a lot of their existence around doing that.
Enlil decreed it to them in cuneiform.
Okay,
His
yeah.
reason for doing it was pretty self-centered, egotistical, and retarded, and had absolutely nothing to do with health.
So Dan,
This is from a being that,
Mhm.
according to the same stories, literally tried to nuke humanity to kill them like cockroaches. So they're going to honor him with his tradition. That's also pretty pathetic.
Are you familiar with the Lost Book of Enki from the cuneiforms in Samaria? It's something that started to become more well known since it was we invaded Iraq and got out a lot of those.
It was the army's first target in the Baghdad Museum the second they entered the city.
So then it got translated and it started to get released, and now we're more aware of the origins of humanity and the history of the earth and where circumcision came from initially. I mean, so far in the history right now, a lot of intactivists know that we know the earliest forms of circumcision started in Egypt with the class, was the slave class. The slaves were circumcised, but also started with the priest class. It was like, so it was a religious control thing to make people more controllable.
Okay.
Disempowering limit birth.
Yeah, at any age. So that's why it became, they tried to combine it as a covenant from God to ultimately to control them. And they had to do it to their enemies. You know, David had to go And to buy his first wife, he had to forget how many foreskins he had to go and get from his
One of
enemy.
many gods from those
Saved it,
tales.
actually.
One of many, of a race of them. And they're going to honor the decree of the one that hated them the most.
Yeah, that goes back even older than Egypt. So it like possibly even to Samaria.
Well, that's very interesting. Have you tried to use this information on religious people or just people in general on the field when you do any kind of intactivism? And how effective was it?
Oh, no, you generally always get the ostrich defense mechanism from them. If you breach any form of what's been ingrained into their minds, brainwashed to be taboo, talking outside of the box of their one allowed book, generally per flavor. Now,
Oh,
what's hilarious is they all come from the same stories, and the only thing any of them have actually succeeded at using the words of their prophets to do is ostracizing anybody else from their faith and basically finding means to justify all the shared 10 commandments their mutual gods of the Abrahamic faith had given them. It's a clusterfuck.
but yeah, it was used as a tactic of war, circumcising. So like a lot of cultures, like the Hebrews, they were encouraged to circumcise those who they conquered. And King David had to go to battle and cut off a bunch of foreskins off of their enemy. It was like over 200 of them or something he brought back to buy his first wife that he wanted. So it's
It's
just
tradable commodity.
the history is very violent, and to create peace on earth, it's very fascinating that the Jews that have been in the intactivist Jews have created the Brit Shalom, which is the covenant of peace, in place of the Brit Milah, the covenant of cutting. So the covenant of cutting, the bris milah, and it's the old way where people thought they had to cut off part of them to display that they are connected to their religion and their God. So instead, now we're trying to create a new world, and where it's not about violence and it's about peace, which is the Brit Shalom, the covenant of peace. So there's a lot of Jews that are advocating for that, just because it's like, wow, look at the world. Well, look at what's all of them, the cultures, the United States, the Muslim world, and the Jewish world are at major war and creating a lot of problems. And it's really extra, and it has a lot to do with the original change that I said that circumcision can do within the men, that also affects the women. And it just creates this whole culture that people don't realize that they're missing out on a whole aspect of their natural selves that is meant to be peaceful and loving and protective and not traumatic. And and then there are a lot of men who do end up having some problems from their circumcision, and these kinds of things can contribute to their overall happiness and their ability to understand and have compassion for what life is. Life is supposed to be fun. Life is supposed to be pleasurable. Life is supposed to be all these wonderful things. And to start life with cutting off a part of your genitals is something that is a big scam.
So I do have another fan question for you, which is actually for, I guess, Miss Angel. So this is what a fan said. I would be interested in hearing her perspective as a female, and if she has children from the perspective of a mother. Also, any advice she has for the movement to better appeal to females and mothers.
Ah, yes. So now that reminds me of your original question about the Islamic intactivists, because they have a really great website that talks about how circumcision harms women. And that's a really great website I share with women, because it explains what exactly gets taken from the male that is actually meant to give pleasure to the female. And women need to understand how much that intactivism supports women, because it helps not only for women to have a deeper intimacy with their partners without any trauma that is just that they have to work through, as well as, of course, more natural intercourse that the way it's supposed to be. So it's so simple like that. But the other aspect is the support that it gives to the men. If they have the support and they start to know that women care about them, it's not just women always asking, for my body, my choice, asking for women's rights. This is a huge men's rights movement to start to give men the power of their body and their autonomy. Nobody owns their body. Nobody can take anything from it without their consent. And that will help men and women all across the board when we are all empowered and we all feel an awareness that we're not letting anybody take anything from anybody against their will. That's a huge movement for freedom that has to happen. It's people's personal choice for their body. People need to be able to get to adulthood to decide what they want to do with their body.
Yeah, consent isn't exactly even
Any
possible
changes.
at birth.
Any changes with their body. So it's that simple. It's a deep level of consent and respect that will help women and men when we start to honor that. So any advice with working with people, because a lot of people, women, it depends on the person, what their angle is, what reason they have, then there's different resources. But I think for a lot of people, the difficulty is in opening up the conversation because it's so sensitive, it seems. Like I just met a friend and she's pregnant with a son and she's due in December. So I just met her and I'm establishing a healthy relationship and, and before I'm going to start asking her intimate questions about what she thinks about circumcision. Some people you can jump right in with it. Other people, you've got to take the time to establish some trust and that respect, that you respect each other, and that it's something that you want to let them know that you care about and that you care about for them, and then ask people what their thoughts are, and then you work your way inward, and then you can communicate and explain to them how it's a whole movement. All over the world, people are starting to help make changes for the future generations to be peaceful and not have these. It's the wave of the future. And if people start to see that, then they realize it's something that's on its way out.
Okay, so it definitely seems like you have like a very global perspective on intactivism as a whole. So how many intactivist groups do you know? Like, could you just throw out a number?
I like and follow all of the ones I ever see, and whenever I come across them, there's so many. There's intact groups in every state and every place. There's one that I'm very passionate about too is in the Philippines. There and places in Indonesia. There's a lot of groups. It's so grassroots. It's harder to gain traction in places where that's why they need support. I am looking into those more lately.
Okay, so what is your favorite intactivist group that is not American as of right now?
Well, Bloodstained Men was the first one I ever protested with. They were near me in Victorville at one point, and I went with 3 of my children and we helped hold signs and walk with them and see what it's like to be in the field. Of course, I love all intact groups that I've ever come across. But they're just the one that I love and admire. They're in your face protests that are very effective for shaking people up.
I'm a fan personally of shock value, so it's uniquely effective.
Shock value is effective.
Okay. So what's it like working with the Bloodstained Men or volunteering with them?
They're so amazing, very passionate people, like doing it out of the goodness of their hearts and out of their time and traveling and going places where there's Super Bowls. They'll go wherever there's a lot of people, but on their way there, they do a whole tour and they go to street corners and then they go up and down with their signs. I'm in awe of that kind of intactivism where they're just doing it out of their own free will and their own time. They're making it happen and bringing people in.
Okay, but if you had to like describe protesting with them, How would you describe it?
Hmm. The location that we were at was actually a very mild location. It's different when you go to a location like they go to pediatrician conferences sometimes. And they do events where they actually really talk with a lot of doctors and even just a lot of people. The location, the one time that I went was a more of a mild location. There wasn't a lot of activity, but there was, you did experience some hecklers, people that got aggressive as they were passing through and not understanding what it was about. Most effective is when you can have conversations with people.
Okay. Well, did you win any hearts and minds? Because it kind of seems like it's all bad from the hecklers and the people that you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm sure it's always a win. Whenever intactivists are showing up, it's just adding support, putting in people's mind another drop of awareness, because it took time for even myself. When I went in talking about it yesterday when I was a child, and I saw all my younger siblings. I had like 5 younger brothers. All of them came home from the hospital with bloody penises and their diapers when I saw my mom changing them, my parents changing. And so I was just programmed from a young age to, oh, okay, this is weird. But over time you kind of forget about it and it's just normal. But then as I got older and I started to see intact, and I started to just be like, and then I met an intactivist group for the first time on Venice Beach. It was just a man with a table and all of this information about intactivism. And that just kind of turned a light bulb on in my head. This is an actual movement. This is like people, it's there. And it takes a lot of times for people to hear it sometimes, if their programming from early on was that it was what was normal, natural, better to be cut. Because I experienced that, just from having partners that were intact, and I found out the benefits of it. And I just started to learn that there's so much that people don't realize that it affects men. And I hope that over time, there should be a huge lawsuit about this in the United States. Whoever has been pushing this, I'm not sure why it hasn't been. There's so many men that have major problems like from it. I don't know why there hasn't been some major movement to make it illegalized. But I do hope that I can help with that in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm definitely glad that you are helping intactivism and that you are on the front lines. So we are running out of time. So where can people follow you if you want them to?
Oh, I'm on Facebook under Miriam Angelheart, and it's probably the same under IG.
If you had to leave our audience off with just one thing from this interview, what would it be?
It'll be to speak up, find your voice. All of the data and is out there. And people, when we talk to them, we have to have our strength. There's something about intactivism that there's like just a huge shadow behind it, that we have to be willing to explore, because people don't want to talk about it necessarily. They don't want to realize what it's been doing on Earth, how it's been creating a lot of problems around the world. And that is the most important thing to understand, that look at the countries that are doing the most damage on Earth, and those are the ones that are where they mass cut all of the men. And
Okay.
and so there's a power in that. We have to realize we have to take back our power, and that's the only reason why they're doing it, is because it takes people's power, a part of it. So we have to all seek to take back our power, and a deep whatever it's going to take, taking back our power. We have to forgive. We have to forgive whatever happened in the past and whoever's doing it, accepting what's been happening, because a lot of intactivists are very angry about what's been happening. And that makes it really hard for change to happen when we're holding on to so much of the pain and the anger from having witnessed this going on for so long, seeing what's happening and not always knowing what to do about it. That causes a lot of hesitancy. People don't know where to start. So we just have to like understand, just deeply forgive ourselves, forgive others whenever we talk with them. It's like whenever you're going to have a conversation with people about intactivism, just automatically forgive whatever is going to come out of their mouth, because you never know what is going to come out and you don't want to get offended.
The topic can be like involuntarily throwing a social breaching experiment on top of them.
Social
Almost like
breaching.
programmed to boo, for them to just conform, practice, and not give a second thought of that.
Yeah, and then it's easier to talk with them if you can start with that feeling of, oh, hey, I'm just gonna open up. What do you think about circumcision? You know, and then to have no reaction based on whatever it is. Like when I say no reaction, no like you have to process your own whatever your reaction is, so that it's not a traumatic experience for you or them to have that conversation. It's because already circumcision has enough trauma for a lot of people. We don't want to continue that trauma through having those conversations with people. And then I just automatically start to forgive whatever their reaction is, and extend understanding for why they have that, because it's just dropping knowledge onto them and reassurance. And then, so you don't want to feel adversely affected at the end of the day. You want to feel good about yourself and how you handled it, how you talked with people about it.
Okay, and I've been asking everybody this question. How do you feel about Prevail over the system?
I'm so grateful for what you're doing. I think that you're going to be bringing different angles that is going to help shed light on the subject for a lot of people.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you for coming out, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Thanks
Likewise.
for hosting and inviting us. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, Dan. Okay, guys, that was Angelheart and her family part 3, end of the trilogy. What Dan had in his hands in the intro will be revealed in less than 1 minute. Let me know your thoughts by commenting down below. I will have Angelheart's links down in the description so you can follow her. Please give this a like to push Angel and Dan's message further, and subscribe so you don't miss our other interviews and intactivism news and much more that we are releasing every week. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.
What you got there? Oh.
Magnetic pogo pin connections. CADAS really overdid themselves with this digital analog converter attachment for their Edge 2 Pro. It's basically a pocket supercomputer microcontroller for Linux coders. It's an amazing little machine. But customizing these, coding them, converting code from, say, x84, x86 formats into an ARC64 format for compatibility on these devices, which can host like Android or Linux operating systems or Windows ARM variants, preferably Linux. But I do a lot of coding with these for automation of microcontrollers and computerizing a lot of tech that otherwise doesn't normally come available computerized.